Hi. Are you doing anything? If you'd like to do something, come join me in making this kind of crate, this kind of carrier, or if you prefer, an organizer. But originally it was conceived as a carrier for beer bottles and cans. All the dimensions are based on that. In the meantime, it turned out that it can also be used as a very versatile crate. As you can see, this one here holds some tools and equipment, and this other one serves as an organizer for cutlery in our summer dining room. This is an old crate that has been around for several years. I actually made it from leftovers because I received some sheet material from a big store that was interleaved with a peculiar board, something between medium density fiberboard and hardboard, kind of light, fairly fuzzy and soft. So they left it here for me to throw away or burn, but I repurposed it, among other things, for this crate. You know, once it was sanded and coated with varnish, the surface became quite solid and it is usable. And back then, in the past, I made the joints using a shaped router, which is specifically designed for drawers. And here it was useful to me because the shaped joint holds everything nicely during gluing, preventing it from coming apart. Of course, thanks to the profile, the glued surface area increases, making the joint overall stronger. Then there's this second crate, which is much newer. I made it relatively recently for a segment on tips from the bird loss kutak, and I used carpenter's pine plywood for it. I thought it was a 12, but then I found out it was just a 10, which actually has a thickness of about 10.4. Ideally, it would be a 12. The joints here are beveled at 45 degrees and dowels are used. Otherwise, the bottom of both of these crates is actually made the same way. There is a groove cut all around the inside, either routed or cut on a table saw, and a bottom piece with a thickness of about 6 to 8 mm is inserted. The same goes for these internal dividers with an ideal thickness of 6 to 8 mm. As for the interiors, I actually made the longitudinal divider fixed and only the transverse ones are slotted in. This way you can either have a space divided into 6 equal parts or a space with 2 small and 2 larger parts. If you remove both transverse dividers, you will then have 2 equal longitudinal openings. Here, I did it a bit differently, actually a bit more simply. The entire inner insert can be removed, so you either have it divided into 6 sections or you have the whole space available if you want to stack something larger in there. And we'll do it the same way with the crate we're going to make now. I want to make it from the same plywood as here. I have it behind me. And this time I don't want to make the joint complicated, but rather just a simple butt joint that will be connected using a dowel. There is a problem when you cut a groove for the bottom on a table saw, as small holes will be visible from the side. You can either fill these holes with putty, or if they bother you a lot, you would need to route the grooves and stop before reaching the end. The dimensions are set: height 30 centimeters, length 26 centimeters, and since we will be gluing these sides between the front and back panels, we will make them 16 centimeters wide. And one more thing about this crate, I made it from some leftover material, so I didn't have much choice. As a result, the grain is horizontal on the sides and vertical here. If you are going to paint it, it doesn't matter at all with the plywood. If you want to leave it natural and it bothers you, then of course you have to do it differently. I recommend cutting a strip with a width of 30 centimeters. This way you can fit these 2 fronts on top of each other within that width, so you will have the same grain pattern. And of course it depends on whether you cut the strip from the board lengthwise or crosswise. If you cut it lengthwise, you'll have the grain running horizontally all around, or if you cut it crosswise, you'll have the grain running vertically all around. That depends on your taste. So what will we need for the production? Besides the material, which means 12 mm boards and then some thinner ones, 6 to 8 mm, and these sticks, we will also need a table saw. We will carefully cut all the parts, then we will proceed to use a saw to make these precisely shaped cuts. Whether it's a manual coping saw, a straight saw, or a band saw, it depends on what each person has available. The more precisely you cut, the less sanding you'll need to do, and you might only need sandpaper or sanding cloth on a rounded block. However, if you don't cut very precisely, a more powerful sander, such as a spindle oscillating sander, will come in handy. Or you can do it like I did, by making just one piece which you sand perfectly and use as a template. You'll save yourself a lot of trouble. Cut out another piece roughly, and then use a trimming router with a bearing to perfectly copy the original shape. You can do this as many times as you like. This is worthwhile if you plan to make multiple crates. For the actual joining, I will actually use this Doweling jig from Uni-max specifically. and I requested it not only because it is absolutely perfect for this crate, but also because it is one of the many tools that are directly manufactured at uni-max. Uni-max is established as a store for tools and equipment for workshops, auto repair shops, and tire services. But few people know that it all started long ago with the production of various jigs, and that production continues to this day. I think it's quite unusual for an online store like this to have its own products, so first I wanted to see the production process, and second I wanted to talk about it with the owner of uni-max. And are you sure it's already up and running? I just checked it now. All right, I checked it. So can we start it? It's waiting for it. Is it waiting for it? So can I then close it?
Now the green one. Straight to green, okay? Straight to green. Usually a quick break. Don't worry. Where will it fly? We'll see. That's it.
We've been making dowel jigs for a long time. It's a staple. I don't understand what those carpenters do with them, but they just keep selling year after year. We've been doing this for about 20 years. Back then, the competitor Anka, we used to manufacture from Doweling. Beautiful engineering, beautiful work, and of course, incredible costs. And at that time, we approached the design a bit differently. We made a tool, we extrude our own aluminum profile. Of course, it's not as simple as it might seem, because the jig needs to exhibit some flatness, and producing the profile in the aluminum plant so that it has the appropriate geometric parameters is necessary, because extruding that bun with the shape of that profile, it falls within 100th. That's simply not a problem. But maintaining the flatness at a length of 650 to 600 milliliters of the jig is of course a certain complication, so it relatively depends on the cooperative partner. But it's a nice product. It has a lot of precise drilled holes, a lot of threads, and we can take a look at how such a thing is made. It's surprisingly fast, and it's astonishing how brutally the drilling crown goes into the material with today's cutting parameters. It's definitely nice to see live.
As a healthy patriot, I naturally appreciate such an initiative and think it would be good if uni-max had some kind of marking on its e-shop for the products it manufactures, whether they are dowel strips, massive woodworking clamps, sanding rollers, or one-handed clamps. This could be a check flag or something indicating made here. I believe that people with a similar mindset to mine would definitely respond to that. Well, one of those jigs is precisely these dowel strips, which are produced in several different versions, regarding the length and also the diameter of the drilling sleeves. This is actually the smallest piece, which has drilling sleeves with a diameter of 6 mm and is ideal for joining materials with a thickness of around 12 mm. Otherwise, this is a so-called edge dowel jig, which means when you want to join two pieces into an L shape, or even butt joint. But if you want to make a T-type joint, which means joining the edge to a flat surface, you will need a similar jig, but a so-called flat dowel jig. This time we'll make do with this edge jig, which actually allows us to drill holes both into the edge itself and into the corresponding piece. It's handy that the drilling sleeves have different lengths, whether for the edge or the surface, so you can keep the stop on the drill bit in the same place. I've also seen jigs that have it done differently, and then you might need to have two drills with different stops set. In the case of two drills, which I really don't think is a very common solution, here you can see that someone really thought it through. The delivery also includes these plastic plugs. They are foolproof, so you can seal the openings that you don't use. Here, for this distance, we will actually only use two holes, so I have plugged the rest like this. And the delivery also includes a simple stop for the drill. It's actually just a simple sleeve with a set screw and an Allen key. It's convenient if the stop lands on the cylindrical shank, but it's worse if it ends up somewhere in the helix. Because first, that screw can damage the chamfer, and second, with thinner drill bits, tightening it can cause the drill bit to bend, which will then wobble. So I prefer to use a composite drilling sleeve or a drilling stop whenever possible, typically. This way, we'll make two opposite corners, and then we'll have to unscrew the stop and move it to the other side to finish the remaining two opposite corners. Once we have everything drilled, we can start gluing. First, I apply glue into the holes in the edges and hammer the dowels in until the glue starts to ooze out of the grooves. This way, I am sure that it is all around the circumference of the dowel and that it is perfectly glued there. Then I apply glue to the opposite holes and along the entire edge. I assemble everything together. And it's good to clamp it down, of course. Ideal for this are cabinet clamps, but if you don't have those, you can use any other clamps. The important thing is to press right along the side panel axis, because if you place it somewhere in the middle, the fronts will bend and first it won't look nice, and second, the shelves won't fit inside. As for this rod here, you can either use a rod like I did, which is from a child's crib, specifically with a diameter of 16 mm. In both of these cases, it is actually inserted into blind holes and then glued so that it doesn't rotate and also holds together, because with this thinner material, there is a risk that it might fall out. But if you want to be sure, we can do it a little differently and drill the holes all the way through. Either make the rod a bit longer and then secure the overhangs with some kind of dowel. However, this will obviously make the sides protrude. If you want it to be flush, we will cut the rod to be just as long as the box. We cut the ends, insert them into the holes, glue them, and then glue and hammer small wedges into the slots. They will spread it perfectly, so it will hold great, and after the glue dries, it will be trimmed and sanded, making it an element that, in my opinion, will look very nice, and at the same time, the joint will be extremely strong. As for the internal dividers, it's simple. We divide the elongated one into thirds and cut a groove halfway through, which will be as wide as the thickness of the material. We do the same in the middle of the dividers. We assemble this, insert it inside, and the box is finished. And finally, of course, some surface treatment. You can use a protective varnish or leave it natural and just treat it with some oil or wax. Of course, it depends firstly on your taste, and secondly, on the way it will be used and exposed to weather conditions. No matter what joining technique you decide to use to make a box or carrier like this, you can find links to all those jigs as usual in the description below the video. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and get to work.